Hello and welcome back to Dry Conversations. I'm your host, Whitney Cowell. Joining me today is Dan Calabrese. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Whitney, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm
Oh,
excited to talk to you. We are
yeah,
new LinkedIn connections, and so I really
yeah.
don't know much about your story at all.
Well, who says there's a story? No. Glad to meet you. I have enjoyed for a while following your. I'm not sure we're that new as connections, but maybe somewhat. Um, m- I'm a writer. I'm a journalist. I'm a marketing content writer. I kind of do all of the above because I'm self-employed, so nobody can stop me.
Sure.
Our company is called North Star Marketing Content. And most of what we do is we write marketing content for the logistics and supply chain industry. I also work as a journalist for transport topics.
Right.
So I've been doing that since 2006, and then working with the various clients on newsletters and blogs and web copy and social media content and press releases and things of that nature. So just professionally, that's who I am. Been doing this for 25 years, and um, and then as far as I don't know how much you want me to just jump into this, but I mean you and I kind of had a little bit of an interaction that had to do with the number of days of sobriety,
Right.
and I think mine kind of got your attention because it's kind of a large number,
Yeah.
um, which it covers. Let me think. What year is it? It covers 43 years. So
That's
it's
wild.
been the vast majority of my life. I
Right.
probably don't look like I'm old enough to have had that much behind me, but I'm older than I look. Um, and I'm happy to tell you anything you want to know about what a blessing it's been to my life and what I've learned from the process.
So let's start from the beginning because nobody, from my experience, gets sober unless if they're just sober curious. A lot of us, it was a pretty serious situation that we found ourselves in to make that change. So I'd love
Hmm.
to start there and learn a little bit about what it was like and what happened.
Sure. My story happened when I was 15 years old. And I was probably like a lot of kids at that time. You're getting mixed up with some other kids that are doing it, and you're experimenting with it for the first time. And in my case, my experimentation was not really on the moderate side. I'm not much of a
Sure.
moderation kind of guy. And I had a pretty intense, I don't know, 9, 10 months of trying to grab it whenever I could, trying to get my hands on it whenever I could. I probably started just as a social thing,
Mm-hmm.
but leaked into if I was home by myself during the day, grabbing some from your parents' liquor cabinet and things of that nature. So there was a night, and I know the date. It was May 7th, 1982. A friend of mine and I rode our bikes to go see a movie at the Town Theater in Oak Park, Michigan. The Town Theater doesn't exist anymore. It's an oldie now, I think. And we went to see a movie called Parasite, which is completely irrelevant to the story, but it's a detail I remember. And we had each brought a fifth of gin. So before we went into the movie, we each consumed about half of the fifth. So I
Whew,
guess that would be a tenth, right?
that's a lot.
Then we hid the bottles in a dumpster behind the movie theater. Went in to watch the movie. Came out either after the movie was over or at whatever point we got tired of it and wanted to just get back to the gin. I'm not even sure I remember that detail. Um, Climbed into the dumpster to find my bottle so that I could drink the rest of it. And as I came climbing out of the dumpster, there was an Oak Park police car pulling up to the scene. I think we were pretty obviously underage, and we were pretty obviously sitting there with fifths of gin behind this movie theater. So out come the Oak Park police officers. Um, they dump out what's left of the bottle, and I'm thinking to myself, they're going to cuff me. They're going to cuff me and take me in.
Mhm.
I don't know why they didn't.
Oh, they didn't.
They didn't. They dumped it out. They gave us a stern talking to, and they told us to get home, tell our parents exactly what had happened, and never do it again.
They didn't even walk you to the door.
No, I mean we were outside. We were outside at the time.
Yeah, but I feel like usually they take you home, right? And then they don't just leave it
No,
up to you to tell the story.
you're right, but I mean, our bikes were right there. I actually rode my bike. Um, I actually rode my bike to go talk to somebody. I rode my bike to go talk to a pastor. In fact,
Wow.
we I went. My friend came with me, stood underneath his window, threw rocks at his window because by this point it's after midnight. He came to the door, or came to the window, I should say, and then let us in. We went upstairs and talked for a while. As it happened, my parents were out of town at the time. They wouldn't be back for several days, so there wasn't going to be the opportunity to tell them about it. But we went home. I slept it off. The next day, I was doing my paper route, and I remember walking the streets of the neighborhood where I delivered papers, not feeling great, and just kind of thinking to my 15-year-old self, I don't think I like this.
Wow.
I don't think I like the way this feels. I don't think I like the part this is playing in my life. And I don't even think I liked it when I was doing it last night.
Sure.
So, it's one of those things where, like, when you do have this seminal moment in your life that involves you crawling out of a dumpster and being confronted by the police, it can give you occasion to rethink some priorities.
Absolutely.
And right in the middle of my paper route, I just made a decision right then and there. I'm never doing this again. Now, I know a lot of people, when they have a bad alcohol experience, say that the next day or the next morning or whatever, and it
Right.
doesn't last. I don't know what to tell you, Whitney. I was a very stubborn 15-year-old, and I was very resolved. And I knew what I wanted and what I didn't want in my life.
And thank goodness for that, you know?
Yeah. And I haven't touched it. I haven't touched it in 43 years. Don't imagine why I ever would. Married a woman who also doesn't drink. Had kind of had her own story with it, but had sworn it off by the time I met her. And it's been a wonderful experience, except for the fact, and I suspect you've probably experienced this as well. When you don't drink and you live in a world where it is so much the center of the culture and the social scene and everything, you do learn to observe things that it's very hard to get other people to see.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
that can be a lonely experience at times. So
Yeah, it
that
can
too
be.
you have to learn to live with.
And to your point, because I mean, I was not that young. I hadn't even had my first drink by 15. But getting sober at a young age, there is this loneliness because the culture, the thing to do is around drinking, right? Especially in your late teens, early 20s is that party scene, especially for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of kids. It's just a phase, or like we're all like, it's experiencing like a new type of freedom. And for some of us, that could mean life or death, and for others they just grow up.
Well, yeah, and I also think one of the things when you're young, one of the things that influences that, and I suspect I'm quite a bit older than you are, so there may be some generational differences to how this was perceived as well at different times in history. But I know when I was growing up, one of the things the adults around me were constantly emphasizing is this is for adults and not for you. And it wasn't that there were problems with it. It wasn't all of it was just this is for adults.
Right.
Well, that made you want to do it because you associated adulthood with freedom and liberty and making your own decisions and all that sort of
Mhm.
thing. So a lot of the kids who were my age, part of the reason they were doing it is it was kind of like thumbing their nose at the whole idea that they weren't adults.
Right.
And that I think is part of how it became so central to the social scene and the culture. And you really know, because like I said, I mean, I was 15 when I decided I didn't want to do it. I went to 4 years of college.
Yeah.
4 years of college when you're absolutely surrounded by. I mean, you think kids are going wild when they're 15. Watch and see what happens when they're 18, 19, 20, and they're on their own for the first time, and
Yeah.
nobody, even though technically they're underage and they're not supposed to be doing it, but you know they all were.
Oh, it's just an unsupervised social experiment at that point.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
That's a big part of college. And, you know, I think because I'm in my 30s, you know, to your point about like the stigma and how it's viewed and things like that, you know, it, I think it has been for quite some time this mark of like, of popularity and access. And it, you know, for me, there was a culture shock when I went to when I moved to Tennessee. This high school that I went to was much, much larger than this high school that I had left. And so there were these different groups, and with these different groups were these different social activities. And that was one that I was just never a part of, right? Like I was, I was not a cool kid. I was not a popular kid. I didn't get invited to house parties and things like that. But college was when I had my first drink. And it, because like I get it of like this is for adults. It's because, you know, we have no idea what control means, self-control means. And so that's where you see a lot of kids making really stupid decisions, right? Because they have no idea how to drink safely. And then for some of us, you combine that with an addictive behavior. And for me, it escalated so fast. Like I'm surprised that I made it to 25. I really am, because I got sober at 25.
Well, I mean, I think one of the things, because I mean, my wife had some similar experiences to what you're describing. In fact, I think my wife's experience was much more like yours than it was like mine. Um, Kind of spiraling in that direction, finding quickly that the experience was not one you controlled very well, but also maintaining this presence of mind, which is hard to find in people in their 20s. But maintaining this presence of mind that says, okay, wait a minute, I even though I'm not controlling very well what's happening here, I understand what's happening here,
Right.
and I know it's not good. And this is actually, I think, this is one of the hardest things that people in general have to do. It's much easier to recognize that something isn't good than it is to change directions because of the discipline it requires.
Right. And and I think, you know, since we're talking about like age and how that factors in, you know, for you and I, like our brains weren't fully developed. So of course that type of self-discipline was really hard. And I admire people like yourself. And you're not the first person I've talked to that just said, this isn't serving me and I don't want to do this anymore. And then they didn't. You know,
Yeah.
for me, there was a lot of struggle of feeling that way and having absolutely no concept, no light at the end of the tunnel of how to do that. Um, and so it's always fascinating for me to hear the stories of people that could just quit cold turkey first try after something that wasn't this, you know, horrendous series of events that led them to that conclusion.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I remember this is probably an important part of the story. There is a really amazing guy who there was once a TV show about back in the 70s. His name is David Toma. And he was a New York cop, and he used to, what he was known for was he would disguise himself and he would infiltrate all these gangs, but he was a vice cop. And actually, for those who are old enough to remember the TV show called Beretta, the first season of it was called Toma, and it was based on him. So later in life, he became a speaker, and he would go around to schools, and he would talk about his experiences dealing with people he met on the streets who, whether it's from alcohol or and what would happen. And he was very powerful in relating the realities of these things. So he came and spoke to my school, and I had a chance to meet him. And later, I actually had a chance to get to know him pretty well. Um, but but one of the things about that experience was you recognize pretty quickly that the societal phenomenon that this is part of is wreaking way more havoc than you realize when you just internalize it to yourself. And after I heard him speak and I kind of put it all together and recognized what's what's my place in this world and what do I want it to be, and what do I want to make sure that what harm do I not want to do? I realized that the hardest part of this was not going to be the not doing it, because I didn't even want to do it. I mean, I know there are people that, like, they struggle to quit because they have addiction and they have the cravings and all that. I didn't really have that. It was a short period of time. I made the decision. That's it. The not doing it was easy. The hard part is, how do you engage a world that is obsessed with it? I think you're on mute.
Apologies. How have you, like, over the years, managed that then? Because you went through some very formative years where that's the primary scene, and even like the dating scene, that there's a window where that is the common way to build connections and to meet people and to find groups. And I'm sure along the way there's been these moments of, I don't want to say temptation, but of maybe second guessing, second thinking on it.
Never really second guessing in my part.
Okay.
I've always been very resolved that this was the right thing to do. But then you do, okay, so you mentioned dating. Now the woman I'm married to now has been sober since before I knew her, so that was never an issue. There was a pretty serious relationship I was in, sort of like late 80s, early 90s, where the girl was a drinker. All her friends were drinkers. The bar scene was their thing. I don't think, now at this point, I was probably 7, 8, 9 years removed from the initial decision.
Mhm.
And I don't think I was strong enough at that. Like, I think I figured, well, people go to bars. That's
Right.
what they do. So you can't, like, force your decisions on everybody else. So you just have to go and smile and drink Coke or whatever. And I was actually taken to task by the person I was dating at the time, because I made her look bad. Because
Oh.
I was always the only one of the group that wasn't drinking. So I wasn't having as much fun as everybody else was. And it made her uncomfortable. And she wished I would drink so that we as a couple wouldn't stand out like a sore thumb vis-a-vis the others in the group.
Mhm.
And it wasn't long before my reaction to that was, let's both find other people.
Thank you.
Because I'm not going to give you what you want. So if that's that important to you, then this isn't going to work. But I mean, that will happen.
Right.
Now at this point in my life, I just don't spend time in those places, and I don't need
Sure.
to. I'm surrounded by people. Most of the people that I know or spend time with also are non-drinkers. And nobody's asking me to. I mean, I'm 58, so nobody's asking me to go out to bar nights or anything. But I mean, over the course of your life, you just have to find the places that you're going to call home and the things that are going to be part of who you
Right.
are, and you got to find people that are going to be with you on that.
Mhm.
Um, I I went from feeling like I had to make accommodations for people who didn't think like me because I should be open-minded and I should be
Right.
accepting and all that, to, yeah, I'm not going to make that much accommodation.
Right. And I think that it's really important to start finding your boundaries in it, right? Because there is, I think with every relationship, there's reciprocity and there's sacrifice of some sort. And if it turns that you're sacrificing the things that keep you safe, whatever that may be,
Hmm.
right? Like for you, you didn't like it, you don't want to go back to it. There's no budging on that. So why be the only person that's making those types of sacrifices? I found it a lot easier, as time has gone on, to implement those boundaries and to better understand people a little bit faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's where the loneliness comes in, as you get to know people, and in certain settings it can feel really lonely when you're the only one, no matter how comfortable you are with your decision.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the types of situations that I don't get into. And for my husband and I, because he's, in the addiction world, we call him a normie. He has a normal brain. But he chooses not to drink because he's married to me and I am not. But, one of the things that I kind of hated to give up, but I needed to early on, was comedy shows. I love comedy shows. It's something that I do. A lot of like comedy clubs have a 2 drink minimum. And I tried that for a while and just handing those to somebody else since I have a good night. But that became a place where I found myself feeling really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Now, further into that journey, I go with other people that aren't drinking, like my husband, and we have ourselves a fantastic time. And I don't find that contrast to feel as sharp as it did before. But then there are other situations where I just don't. Like, thank goodness I really don't care about sports because stadiums are filled with it and you smell it. And I don't like that. And I don't like being a part of it. And no matter how confident I am in my recovery and how firm I am on my resolve to not drink, it still is just not a fun situation for me. And that's the type of sacrifice that I'm just not willing to make anymore.
Now, that's such an interesting thing that you mentioned because I'll share my experience on that. My wife and I are Detroit Tigers season ticket holders.
Okay.
So we attend, 50 odd games a year. Um, the observation you just made about the ubiquitousness of alcohol at sporting events is is so overwhelmingly true. And you notice, as one who is not doing it, I'm here to watch the game and that's it.
Hmm.
You notice it like you wouldn't believe. You notice what people will do to make sure they get it, how long they'll wait, how many times they get up and come back with four, with two in each hand.
Yep.
Um, how access to the alcohol is more important to a lot of people than the game itself.
Oh yeah.
And and also the way that there, in fact, there's a vendor, Detroit Tigers, if you're watching this, do something about this. There is a vendor who will come into our section, and you know how vendors are at sporting events, they have their thing they cry out.
Yeah.
So this guy sells beer, and he cries out, "Don't be shy, be drunk." That's
Cool.
what he keeps saying. Um, and everybody thinks it's hilarious because it's consistent with their culture. It's
Yeah.
consistent with how they define having a good time. That this chemical alteration of my brain and my perception of everything, that is fun. So he's just telling me to have fun. And my wife and I are looking at each other like, he's saying it again. But people aren't seeing what we're seeing and they're not understanding what we're understanding.
Yeah.
So yes, sometimes the most lonely experiences are the one where you're surrounded by lots and lots of people.
Yeah. It's very true. And that, gosh, what a lightly damaging message to be saying that, because you have people like myself where, and I'm guessing you too, if you're going to come on here and share, your stories, a lot of us aren't shy. We are typically a very lively bunch with lots of hobbies and lots of
Hmm.
interests, and we're willing to share them with anybody. And
Hmm.
I have sang karaoke completely sober at a Super Bowl
Me,
party.
so have I. Probably sang better.
So,
Uh,
and I appreciate you sharing that, because that is a sacrifice that feels really hard to make, because I see it as a sacrifice now to go to it. In early recovery, a lot of people see it as a sacrifice to not. And that's really hard. I think that's one of the hardest parts of early sobriety, regardless of how you got to the choice of being sober, is what do you actually need to step back from that might
Mhm.
damage the path that you're on? And that those are really, really hard decisions to make. To your point earlier of the discipline, right? I don't want to jeopardize this new decision, this new life, this new path that I'm on. And what does that really mean? And taking the time to set new priorities in your life.
Yeah. And
That's hard to do.
especially because, and depending on how young you are, some of the things that it probably would be best for you to step back from may be impossible to step back from. For example, if within your family alcohol is a big part of the family culture, um, you can't really step back from that when you're 15. So the, I think that kind of thing is part of the reason a lot of people don't make it, because the things you really should get away from, in all practical terms, it's impossible to do that. So
Right.
you have to learn to have this steel will about you that it's just really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, and it takes
Uh,
practice. You know, it takes a lot of practice, and to anybody that's in those situations where they feel like they can't and that it's impossible, there is always a way. You know, like take your headphones, take a book. I mean, what I've done, and just take a book, right? Like I have a family that now they're not alcoholics, thankfully, but they drink and they live on the water, and so there's a boat. Where there's a boat, there's alcohol. So I pack my own little bag and of snacks and food, and I pick the drinks that I want, my sparkling waters. I drink my sparkling waters. And so I pick my favorite flavors, and I take a book, and that's what I'll do. The Christmas parties, that I mean, I hear stuff like that all the time where it's really common, where the family just gets drunk together at the holidays. Like it might be really uncomfortable to still be a part of the situation but remove yourself from the activity, but it can be done. It just can feel really uncomfortable the first couple of times that you do it.
Now, I'm curious about this. At the family events that you're describing, have you ever had situations where someone offers you alcohol even though they should know full well the decision you've made?
So I guess my story is a little different in that capacity because I didn't even tell my family I was sober until I was 10 months in.
Okay.
I had lit the town on fire behind me, and I had to kind of separate and get my bearings and become a totally different person before that conversation would have been even safe for them to have with me,
Hmm.
and for me to be in the right mental and emotional capacity to have that with them.
Okay.
So, I haven't experienced that. Now, I have a very teeny tiny family, and a lot of people in my family actually don't drink. But, I've witnessed it with others where that's happened. And I will say I had a roommate
Hmm.
that would invite me out to $5 margarita night at Chili's. And I had to tell her week after week, I am sober. I am sober. Like, no, I don't want to go to the bars with you. I'll come pick you up if you need me to. Like, I'll keep my phone on loud tonight. And every once in a while I would go, but I'll go with you, and then like 10 o'clock, I'm going to go home. But that it is really uncomfortable, and it creates for me a little bit of sadness of like, this is really important to me and you don't seem to care at all. And I can't take it personally that they're not as invested in my journey as I am. That I think is just an emotional maturity
Yeah.
line that everybody has to cross at some point.
Yeah, probably for some of those friends. I mean, she knows you're sober, and yet she keeps inviting you out to. So why is that? I think a lot of the time, and I know my wife experienced this when she stopped drinking as well, that her friends, or the friends she had at the time, they were afraid they were losing her,
Mhm.
because if you're not going to do this with us, what do we have? So there would be a certain resistance to her resolve that was based on, come on, you're one of us. Come on. And she would even get questions like, what do you think, you're better than us now?
Oh,
And that sort of thing. And I think that when a person's trying to stay sober, but it looks like the result of that might be that they're going to lose relationships that have been valuable to them. Um, you're seeing it in a really healthy way, if difficult, because you're recognizing that there isn't the respect there that there should be. I think a lot of people who don't have the resolve, that might be the thing that tips them back over.
Sure, absolutely it is.
You know, I can't keep these relationships. I can't keep these friends. And they, even though I'm trying to do the right thing, they're going to turn it around on me and kind of act like I'm being unreasonable toward them. And they cave to that pressure.
Sure. And that's the loneliness piece, right? Like you're saying goodbye to a lot of the people, places, and things that you once knew. And and I had to say, is this really a friendship if this is what it's based on, right? Like is this a friendship for a season or a friendship for a lifetime? And for some of us, a lot of us, and a lot of times, it's a friendship for a season, and that's okay. It's a. I think what they don't prepare you when you get sober, whoever they are, is that there is going to be this wave of grief that you're not going to expect. And it's not just, I can't drink anymore. One of my favorite stories to tell is like, I was just absolutely devastated that I was not going to have champagne at my wedding. How do you have a wedding and not have a bar? How do you have a wedding and not have a toast with your glass of champagne? Just as single as I can be, absolutely wrecked over this reality in therapy one day. And my therapist is like, I mean, you're not even dating. Like, what are you? But like I had to walk through these like new realities to get a new perspective on what I was willing to say goodbye to in order to have a different life. And some of those people, like they're not in my life today because they enjoyed a version of me that just doesn't exist anymore. And I can't make somebody be a champion of the version of me that I'm after.
That is such a great way to describe it, because the version of you that people thought they liked wasn't real. And
Sick.
and right, exactly. And you couldn't even find out who you really were unless you let go of that
Yeah.
and learned to deal with the realities of all things, the good, the bad, the difficult, the ugly, but ultimately finding who you were in your natural state to be able to deal with it.
Right.
Um, I mean, and this gets into this whole thing about, because we do this as humans, as social creatures. Whether we admit it to ourselves or not, we often try to present ourselves in ways that we think will be acceptable to other people,
Hmm.
and so it's only natural that we sort of comport to the norms of the culture, and
Right.
alcohol is part of that.
Hmm.
So as much as I often think that when we think about it, it's like, I find it interesting how widely people will accept concepts that, if you just think about it critically, are patently absurd. So I mean, and one example of that is the idea that fun is associated with the chemical altering of my mind and the compromising of my ability to understand things rationally.
Hmm.
That equals, put a little math symbol there. That equals fun. If you sit back and think critically about that, that is the absolute most absurd concept.
Yes.
And yet, those of us who see it that way are in a very distinct minority, because cultural norms are very powerful.
Yeah, they are.
And you can get people to accept almost anything if it appears to them that everybody else accepts it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
It's a totally different type of social proof of,
yeah,
like a ideology that's happening.
right,
And,
right.
and that's why, there's, and it's trendy right now. So this younger generation, the like sober curious, and like this wellness journey that they're on. And I think like this is a great time to have these conversations, because for some of them, this might be a lifestyle change that could save them in the future.
Yeah.
But like this narrative has shifted. And we saw this, when I was growing up, it was cigarettes, right? Wildly popular. All of the supermodels had them. The commercials, like, the cars had ashtrays, and like I grew up in that. And then in the movement where that's going to kill you, and this is what we're doing to stop it.
Hmm.
And now we're seeing like another version of that, a light version, a different version, But similar messaging with alcohol of like, this is poison. You're putting poison in your body, and that's how it's being referred to. So there's this like new wave of young people that are shouting this narrative. I don't know if it's a trend that'll last or if it's just a flash in the pan kind of trend, but it's happening.
Yeah, there are a lot of elements of it that do come off as quite trendy. I mean, even the term sober curious sounds kind of trendy to
It
me.
is.
And I do think, and this is not to the good, that some of it coincides with the rise of the mainstreaming of marijuana, which is
Yeah.
also a big problem. But even so, even if it is trendy and faddish, it might save some lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so while I normally resist all trends just because I don't like trendiness, in this case, if it saves some lives, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll see what happens next. And the conversation of marijuana, I guess, is a conversation for another day because we're out of time. But this, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story because it's so different from mine, and I love hearing how people got sober and the fact that you did it so young and you've stuck to it. I find that just incredibly inspiring.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. I think I just want people to understand that once they recognize something is right for them, that is the most. It doesn't matter what anybody else has to say about it. I got pushback from some of the people you would expect I would never get pushback from on something like this. And they had their own reasons, and that's a whole nother part of the story. But if you know that something is right for you, don't let anyone move you off that. And even if there will be rough waters, you can handle that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I have given any credit to Jesus at this point, so I will do that now because I couldn't have done anything without him.
Yeah.
Nor can I now.
Yeah, it is by the grace of God that I'm sitting here today. I'm telling you, I believe that my life still has a purpose because it didn't end in the situations that I thought it was going to. So someone, the God that I understand and that I know, the God of the Bible, has kept me here, and I'm
Amen.
eternally grateful for that.
And look at the good you're doing just by doing this, not to mention all the good you do in our industry. And it's been a life well worth saving. I'm very glad it happened.
Thank you. And I would love to know, because we briefly touched on hobbies before we close out really quickly, what's your favorite hobby that you do in your sober time?
Baseball.
Baseball.
Which you probably could already guess from what I said before, but I love baseball. I mentioned we have season tickets. My son and I go to minor league games in the summer, and that is absolute joy to my life.
What a fantastic way to make memories with your son.
Yeah, it really has been.
Well, Dan, this has been a great conversation. Thank you again for joining. If somebody has questions, they want to connect with you, what's the best way for somebody to reach you?
They can email me at well, probably the simpler way. Find me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
There's my name. There's my company. Find me, connect with me. That way I don't have to try to spell out an email address. But that's an easy way to find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. And to everybody else, we will see you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Whitney.